for coming to our second annual Urban Forestry Workshop. And we have a good schedule today, a lot of speakers. So I'm just going to give a little bit of a background about Fall River, what's going on right now, and what we'd like to focus on. This is an image I just took last week, actually. It's a very inspiring time of year to be thinking about trees. It's actually right outside across the street. Some of you may recognize that. And I wrote, "From good soil grows healthy trees." And that's because only half of the actual structure, the physical organism, is above ground. The other half, and that's the part that we enjoy, but the other half is a large part of what grows the above ground part, and it's just as important that that is healthy as well. So that's the stuff that's out of sight, but very important to be cared for. So I also walked around and took a couple images right here in the city as well, and there are a mix with every city, and I would say that we're aiming, and we've been making some good progress towards this, but we're aiming to have less of this and more situations like this where the trees really do have the space for the root structure to grow and fill the space that it wants to fill. On the left, you can see an image of what we have thought in the past the root structure typically looks like, but below that is a more accurate representation of the space that the roots typically fill. It's much broader, shallower, but much broader. So then there's also just the urban infrastructure as a whole. There's a lot of the different departments within the city have different needs and goals, and we'd like to work with them and have the trees work so it's a symbiotic relationship in the planning process. So you do have some difficult situations like this where there may not be a lot of space for trees, but there are always solutions. Just have to get creative about it. And that's also another image from here in Fall River. So you can have both. Whoops, and sort of paused. All right. So Fall River's actually been making some really spectacular progress past year and a half, couple years. It has been a tree city now for 8 years and just recently got another growth award. You may see more about that in a future presentation today. They also made a huge step in creating the tree ordinance, which is legislation that needs to be followed and can be given credit for why the tree expert company is involved and getting Tom Eaton, the tree warden, in place. And a lot of people worked really hard on having that happen. In addition, we had a tree inventory completed, and we'll be seeing a presentation about that today as well. And there's also a setback policy that's in progress, and the setback policy is important because that's a way that the city can work with the residents in helping get trees in that space that's just outside of the right-of-way but on private property. So it's a little bit of a shared investment there, and that's in progress right now. And the city has also been awarded many grants that have been a very huge help. One of which was extremely important is the Urban Forestry Challenge grant. Thanks to DCR, they have been a huge help in getting all of this started. And so we'll go through a couple of things that we were able to do with that grant, one of which, as Davy Tree was able to be hired to help out with that. There were lots of different pruning and planting workshops. There's been a lot of educational articles about growing and taking health care of trees. Apologize, this thing is freezing. We were able to help with both planting plans for parks and different spaces around the city, as well as the actual installation. On the left there, and on the left image at the bottom, is Memorial Grove, where there was a really nice ceremony done on Memorial Day if you want to take a drive by North Park. and take a look at that while you're in the city. Also, Durfee Street on the right, also named Bowenville Green. You can see that image on the lower right. Tree stewards are helping out with that. Cemeteries, parks and cemeteries. Got a lot of help from people around the city doing the installation. Oops. My apologies for this freezing. We also had a few different Arbor Day plantings occur at North Park again. There was the giant sequoia on the left, and on the right there was the Durfee High School had 5 Atlantic white cedars, thanks to the trustees of reservations for that donation. And for Dale Tree for doing the installation. On the left there, it's the mayor giving his proclamation. And we'll also talk about upcoming events for this year today. We're, of course, doing more Arbor Day events, which is going to be this coming Friday, so stay tuned. And then we were able to officially certify 17 new tree stewards to add to the Fall River Street tree planting program, which is kind of the backbone of volunteers for the city. They do an incredible amount of work, and they really are professional in the way that they treat the trees, and their knowledge is very extensive. So they do a wonderful job, and even just last minute, the other day, they were asked, would it be possible to move a tree? And that same day they came and moved it. It was incredible. So we can really thank them for that. This is we walked around the city. We had a few different tree ID training days. This was an outdoor one, and then planting, hands-on experience, and proper pruning as well. And they seem to really enjoy it. So, all right. So we're going to get started. We got a lot to cover today, very exciting. And
well, thanks very much for inviting us and organizing this. Mary Ann, good to see you. I'm going to get out of the way very quickly. Molly actually put this presentation together, did a great job, and I'll say a few words at the end. But glad to be back. Tremendous progress in the city over the past several years because of all of your work all together. We're really happy to be able to support your work, and DCR is committed to continuing that work through all the grants that Emily mentioned, through our partnership with the Urban Ecology Institute, another large grant and a partner in this whole process. So it's really a collaborative effort that we're glad to be part of. So I'll turn it over to Molly and hope a little interesting perspective on some of the bugs and pests in the news.
And we're going to be talking about primarily, well, emerald ash borer and gypsy moth. But first, let's talk about why exotic insects are often problematic. And what we find is that most serious pests in the U.S. are not native, and there are a couple reasons why. One is that trees have limited defenses to these insects. They didn't co-evolve with these insects and have no defenses. Any native natural controls, maybe birds, other things that may prey upon these insects, also have no history with them and may not recognize them as food sources. And so when you have an insect that arrives here, can tolerate the climate, can find food, and can complete its life cycle, they can become established and can become problematic. And we should point out that this can also happen with native insects as well. Whenever that factor that keeps them in check is impacted, that insect can reach outbreak phase as well. And this slide and a couple of the gypsy moth slides we'll see are adapted from Bob Child, so just to give him the credit. So an invasive family album, I probably don't need to tell you all that we have already lots of invasives here, many of which are quite problematic. And some have been here for a long time, and some are more recent arrivals. And primarily I'm talking about insects, but I threw Dutch elm disease in there as well, because we know that diseases can also travel and become established and cause problems the same way insect pests do. So we're going to start with emerald ash borer, which was detected in Massachusetts in August of last year for the first time. It was also detected in Concord, New Hampshire within the last couple weeks. So, you know, it's coming. It'll be here at some point. And for those of you not familiar, emerald ash borer is a small, metallic looking emerald green insect. But the most damaging life stage, like most insects, is the larval form. The larvae feeds in the cambium and can disrupt the flow of nutrients in water, eventually killing ash trees. I should mention this only impacts ash trees, and it's pretty total devastation for ash trees. Very effective at killing ash trees. So just to give you some of the signs and symptoms to look for, probably the #1 way to identify a tree that is infested with emerald ash borer is to look for bark that's been flecked off by woodpeckers. Woodpeckers are great at finding emerald ash borer larvae and preying upon it. You may also see trees with epicormic sprouting, such as on that middle picture. Of course, you may see that in urban environments as well, because we know a lot of our urban trees are under tremendous stress, and that is a strategy to try to survive. The other way, and the stars sort of are highlighting the key things to look for, is dieback. But of course, you may see that anyway in ash trees, which are having a tough time in the Northeast anyway. Some of the other characteristic signs, the D-shaped exit holes, the galleries, those can be very tough to find, to see if you're on the ground. They're very small, the exit holes. So I'll give you a picture of what to look for. So this was first detected in the Detroit area in 2002, and since then it has spread to 19 states. Obviously helped by people moving firewood, nursery stock, but just want to emphasize how tremendously fast this insect has impacted such a large portion of the U.S. These areas are quarantined and impacted by that restricts the movement of wood. So after 2002, the USDA embarked on a major eradication program. We didn't know anything about this insect. There was not a lot, even in the Chinese literature. So a tremendous amount of research began, as well as looking into how we can treat it with chemicals or silvicultural methods. And we had eradication programs that were surveying, looking for infested trees, removing infested trees, treating entire municipalities. So major effort, millions and millions and millions of dollars. So we're going to pause the emerald ash borer story there and go back in time to 27 Myrtle Street in Medford, Massachusetts. And we don't always know the exact location where an invasive came to the U.S., but in this case, we know exactly where it came from. And this man, French artist, astronomer, entomologist, botanist, he had a lot of interest. Leopold Trouvelot wanted to raise silkworms and develop a silk industry in the U.S. And he had colleagues in France send him specimens. He went there and brought back caterpillars to try to find one that he could use here. And I'll just point out, he was a very active astronomer and probably wishes he was remembered for that more than gypsy moth. So anyway, he had all these caterpillars coming to 27 Myrtle Street, and eventually this one came, the gypsy moth, and escaped. And the time period we're talking about is the 1860s. And so they escaped, and he immediately notified local officials, the state, because as an entomologist, he understood that this could be very problematic. And there was no response. So without natural controls, without our trees having any defense to the gypsy moth, we all can imagine, we all know what happened next. And it probably felt like that. But really what happened next, this was big news to the entomological community. They got it right away. And we saw in 1870 the American entomologist talking about our gypsy moth and how rapidly they were multiplying, how big a problem they were going to become for Massachusetts. But what we saw was that it wasn't until about 20 years later that we actually got our first monograph in Massachusetts. And so this appeared in 1890, a year after the state, Massachusetts, embarked on its own eradication, which was pretty major, as we will see. So within that lag, there's a lot of time for the gypsy moth to become established. And of course, we all know that that's what happened. I'll point out that these old publications are all available on archive.org. It is very neat to look at them. Beautiful drawings. So this is just, and even this monograph was pretty short in that one issue. So gypsy moth, native to Europe, it can be problematic even there. It prefers oaks, but it does have a wide range of trees and other plants that it can impact. And you can identify it by those 5 pairs of blue dots and 6 pairs of red dots. And it's problematic because it actively feeds on foliage, can defoliate trees, and repeated defoliations along with other stresses, you can end up with a lot of dead trees. The other reason it was problematic is because it has urticating hairs, and that just means irritating. So it could be difficult to handle. So, a nuisance. And the females, they can lay about 500 eggs. They'll lay them anywhere. They don't fly. So it can be messy. You end up with larvae everywhere. Males have very feathery antennae so that they can seek out females. And so that little guy, these are all Massachusetts, and it doesn't show up too well down there, but just large swaths of forest totally defoliated. And we know that it moves slowly. The female doesn't fly, and this timing, we didn't have a lot of cars, we didn't have people moving around as much as they do now, so naturally it moved very slowly. It's still in New England, many, many decades later. We see warnings to campers and travelers to, inspect their vehicles. And, so contrast this with EAB, which, had already gone through 19 states in a much shorter time, assisted by us. There is still ongoing survey for gypsy moth here in Massachusetts. It's not quite as extensive as it once was, but we're obviously interested in any defoliation that gypsy moth may cause, especially in areas where it may overlap with winter moth, which also will stress trees. So you can see sort of the frontier there in yellow where the infestation is advancing. And then this was the most recent map I could find. You can see New England, a lot of states aren't even reporting their surveys. So just to go back, because this is my favorite part, all the campy photos. This is a staged photo. The year is a little too early. It's the 1890s, I believe. Huge elm in Malden. People climbed up, hired people to pick off egg masses or treat them with creosote. They also burned the ground, trying to eliminate the pupal stage, which is the resting phase before it emerges as an adult, trying to kill those by fire. And then this elm did not make it. I don't have a year for that photo. But you know, the devastation we saw in the forest, but also, of course, in the planted landscape. Lots of work treating trees with all sorts of chemicals, lead arsenate, DDT, you know, pretty widespread spraying, both from the ground and from the air. With some warnings. And, you know, so like we saw with, probably works better the other way around, but, you know, the huge effort we saw with emerald ash borer, you know, we saw an even bigger effort maybe with gypsy moth. So again, the defoliation. And just this slide is just to show you sort of the extent of the work with gypsy moth, trying to do research and try to get to the bottom of it. So you had people involved in mapping infestations. You have the release of parasitoids and parasites without a lot of study. You know, they just kind of open the box and out they go. And of course, with especially after World War II, we saw airplanes used pretty extensively for spraying. Helicopters. They also use mating disruptors that they would spray. You, of course, had people working with the planes, inspecting materials at ports, and there were some women working on this, you know, also. And so what we have is a major effort to educate the public, to inspect material for egg sites to try to limit that expansion. You know, of course, millions and millions of dollars spent trying to eradicate that. But of course, from looking at those maps, we know that it continues to expand. So what has happened? Well, we've found that white-footed deer mice, white-footed mice, I can't remember if it's deer or not. Anyway, white-footed mouse preys extensively on the pupa that are in the ground. And we found through research that as the population of gypsy moth and the mouse varied, you know, they varied at the same, they followed each other. We also found parasitoids that could heavily impact populations. And this is an egg parasitoid that lays its egg inside a gypsy moth egg, and then this wasp develops inside the egg, killing the gypsy moth larvae eventually and completing its own life cycle. Pretty neat. But even these didn't provide total control of the gypsy moth. And for that, we had to wait for a couple diseases. And one is the NPV, or nucleopolyhedrosis virus. And this first started showing up in the middle of the last century when we had populations of gypsy moth that were just very, very dense population. And this virus impacts populations of gypsy moth that are very high. It's naturally occurring, right, came with them, and you end up with this characteristic U-shaped hanging larva. And in the late 80s, 1989, I believe, in Connecticut, folks first started seeing gypsy moth that started out looking like that, and then they just sort of seemed to dry out from the inside and just sort of shriveled. And it turned out that the fungus, Entomophaga mimiga, which had been introduced in that early phase, the 1910, 1911, it had been one of the controls that was brought over because during that time they were trying to find pests, diseases, anything that they could release that might control the gypsy moth. So we didn't see it again for many, many decades, and then it showed up in 1989, and this is a good control when we have wet springs. As a fungus, it does need moisture to be effective. So these really, and NPV is really the #1 controlling factor for gypsy moth when we have these high outbreaks. And you can see 1981, which was the worst year for defoliation. And since then, as we imagine that Entomophaga and other controls were sort of becoming established, we see subsequent outbreaks have not been as bad. So eventually, nature, maybe with our help, caught up to the gypsy moth. So now we're going to go back to today and think about EAB and some of the controls that we're hoping will be able to control EAB in the future. And there's a lot of research into both parasitoids that will affect the larva and that will affect the egg stage. And there are trials going on now where they're releasing these. So we will, wait for those results, and hopefully we'll be able to, find something that will be able to control EAB. In the meantime, we may eventually see native parasitoids or native predators, such as woodpeckers, that will start preying on EAB more. And we have to think about, the future of ash. It's going to be very difficult for ash in the future with EAB. And so thinking about that as well, sort of waiting for nature to catch up here. And just to put this in a little bit of context, hemlock had a really difficult time about 5,000 years ago, and we can use paleoecology, looking at fossilized pollen and seeds, to look at sort of history of plants. And so hemlock declined about 5,000 years ago, and we now know through this research that it's likely the hemlock, eastern hemlock blooper. And we saw hemlock survive in these small populations. It was wiped out from much of the country, but from these small populations, it came back. And it took 1,000 years, but we of course now have hemlock that, of course now has hemlock woolly adelgid and elongate hemlock scale, so maybe we'll see this again. But that balance did come back for the hemlock. Of course, winter moth, major devastating pest. And researchers at UMass looked to another infestation of winter moth in Nova Scotia that had been successfully controlled by a fly, Cyzinus albicans. And if you look at the solid line, that's the population of winter moth. And they started releasing a Cyzinus in 1954 to control winter moth in Nova Scotia. And it took a few years, but you can see that dark dotted line. That population of the parasitoid established, and you see the population of winter moth crash once that control is in place. And lucky for us, this research is going on at UMass, and we have had releases of the Cyzinus in eastern Massachusetts, and so far the results are pretty good. Joe Elkington, the lead researcher at UMass, quoted last year in the paper saying that he believes we will have this under control very soon. So thinking about pests that we have to live with, these are pests that we end up trying to mitigate. We try to lessen the impact. We try to slow the spread. But we do have at least one here that we are trying to eradicate. And so just to point out, that difference, that there are some pests that we don't want to live with. So EAB, very widespread, sort of the horse is out of the barn. We can only work to mitigate that now. Contrast that with Asian longhorn beetle, where we have these very isolated populations, Ohio, New York, Massachusetts, Ontario, very isolated, and we do have some infestations that have been eradicated already. So what makes Asian longhorn beetle different than the gypsy moth or the EAB or than the hemlock woolly adelgid, these other pests that we just can't eradicate? And that is it has a lower reproductive rate. It doesn't fly very far on its own. We can identify infested trees. It's not maybe as tricky as looking for small EAB holes. And it's been successfully eradicated. So pests that we can't live with versus pests we can live with. And we want to continue looking for effective biocontrol measures. Look to both native and non-native but highly selective parasitoids. We want to educate the public to not move firewood. We want to enforce quarantines to keep that wood in place. And in time, we can hope that the balance will come back and that we'll have EAB controlled by one or more of those biocontrols, like we now have with gypsy moth in the east. So that's all I have. Thank you. Emily mentioned the Citizen Forester newsletter. You can email Eric if you want to sign up for that. It comes out once a month, and we also do occasional notices of programs that we hold. So, thank you.
And thank you for inviting me. Appreciate it. This is going to be 180 degrees, if not more. Spin it around from where Molly and Eric were talking about with plants and diseases and insects. My name is Dave Donahue. I work for National Grid. I work in the Hopedale office, and it's a part of our area that we call the Southeast District, which serves Fall River. We also have a local office in Somerset that is more directly responsible for things that go on day to day in the city of Fall River. And Doris, I appreciate if you could go on to that So what I wanted to talk about was utility agriculture. There is such a topic and a subject as utility agriculture. Throughout the country, many utilities, if not all of them, have a utility line clearance tree trimming program. Now, many do it very similar. Others do it differently. They might bid differently and get the work done. What I'm hoping to do today is kind of paint a picture, I guess, on our role, perhaps in local urban forestry. Molly and I were talking when we got together to kind of come up with how does National Grid work with the cities and towns, and what is our role in what goes on in the urban forest. So some of the questions I hope I can answer, who does this work and when? How do we know what to do and where? We'll explain how we work with the city and its tree warden or forester, and why National Grid needs a healthy and diverse urban forest in each of our communities to, I guess, have a successful, low visible program.
This is Trees, a community treasure. And I also wanted to mention Marianne Wardell. She deserves a lot of thanks for all the work that she's done to help build and protect the urban forest here in Fall River. She is president of the Fall River Street Tree Planting Program, a retired registered nurse and nurse manager at Truesdale and Charlton Memorial Hospital, mother of 2, grandmother of 5, and volunteer advocate for tree planting and tree maintenance for the city of Fall River for 17 years now. So, also up we have Louise Kaczynski, is a retired elementary school teacher. She is on the board of the Fall River Street Tree Planting Program and is a certified tree steward for the city of Fall River. And we have John Sylvia, is a human resource specialist supervisor for the U.S. Department of Labor in Boston. He is the current president of the Niagara Neighborhood Association and was vice president before that. He has been a member of the Street Tree Planting Program since 2009 and is now a member of the new Fall River Tree Commission, as well as being a certified tree steward for the city of Fall River. So.
But before I start, I want to say that you're going to see a lot of repetition. That's because Fall River is so great. We're doing it all already. So a lot of the stuff that you're going to see is already been mentioned. But so that's because we're doing it.
And we'll go through quick.
Yeah, because we're already past our thing. So the mission is the planting program's mission is to provide a sustainable tree planting program for the citizens of Fall River, to educate the public regarding the benefits and value of trees in the urban environment, and to advocate for long-term tree maintenance.
Okay, these are some of the goals that we have here in the city of Fall River, and that's to increase the number of trees that we plant, to provide tree steward training, and community awareness. I think most important to mention is some of the things that have been accomplished here. We have now a tree ordinance that was put together and was mentioned previously. We've also had 3 tree steward trainings. And what's also important to note, since the inception of the Tree Planting Committee, which was established back in 1996, 1,000 trees were planted here in Fall River by this committee. So I think that's really noteworthy.
We hope to plant 100 trees this year. We're going over
Okay. Okay, and some of the benefits, not to be repetitive, but some of the benefits: social, economic, environmental, aesthetic. And I can just talk to this. These are trees that were planted by the Street Tree Planting Committee on Brayton Avenue. This is when I actually joined the committee back in 2009. And I had just newly joined my neighborhood association, and Marianne Wardell had put some pamphlets out in our neighborhood group and asked if people wanted trees planted. And we got a grant from the Mass Relief Grant Association here in Fall River, and these were planted. I've been accused by my daughter of telling me at one time that these trees were more important when I was watering them than her that one summer, because I was babying them so much. But I can honestly say what's happened with this is that I think the Fall River Garden Club originally had planted some flowers at each end of these, and we had taken that over and the last 2 years, other committee members, such as Helen Rigo and I, have really adopted this and brought this together. And what's really been nice is that toward the end of the summer, when things really bloomed there in the flowers, we had people come up or send us emails as to how nice this area had looked. So that was really a nice thing to see, and I think it all goes back to the aesthetics. We're making a difference. This is an area in Fall River that people come right off Route 24 and see this. It's almost like a gateway into Fall River, so I can say that that's really been something that, as with our group, we've really been proud of.
Okay,
memorial trees.
memorial trees. Any citizen can have a tree planted in memory of someone. They have to purchase the tree. They can have different kinds of trees. But they are responsible for watering and mulching, taking care of the tree. And if they want a marker, it has to be ground level, flush with the ground. And of course, the park has to okay the site.
And the trees
Before
are
planting.
roughly $200,
Well,
right?
200, probably depends on what kind of tree you get, but, so it's not cheap, but it's a living memorial, so it's something that's good.
Okay, these are some other trees, and I think we were just doing maintenance on these the other day, right, at North Park. A couple of the committee members were mulching these trees and pruning them, and I think that was done over the last few years, and this was another tree planting that we got involved with at North Park. Okay, and
Those are some memorial trees from North Park.
North Park at the top near President Avenue. Some other tree, these are probably way before '09 that you guys got involved in on Maple Street and Winter Street. And there's not there aren't trees that are here, but we did. These are others that I think probably 2 years ago, right?
Okay, and these are trees that citizens have wanted planted in front of their home, and they've agreed to take care of them.
And there's not anything in this slide, but a few years back we planted some trees. I believe it was on 4th Street, I believe. Yeah. 5th Street. And when they were planted there, I know a lot of folks had said people were going to tear them down, but I have to say they're still in pretty good shape. And the folks that were there each adopted those trees, so that's a good thing.
And right now, come May, we're going to be planting trees on Robeson Street. They just have to agree to water and mulch and to take care of it. And and a lot of these 22 applicants want 2 trees. So Robeson Street is going to be looking rather nice.
Some of the benefits, obviously, you want an area, and trees do bring in more business. If there's an area where there is more trees, people want to sit down, they want to get out of the sun when they're shopping, and shoppers, the statistic states 12% more is spent on goods. And I think that's something that we got to get people to understand here in Fall River. About 2 or 3 years back, we got involved in doing some pruning on South Main Street. And I believe there's a gentleman that came out and said, when are you guys going to tear these down, remember? And we tried to tell him that, this only helps improve the area. So I think it's to change the mindset here in Fall River, like in other areas, that this helps. And it's going to help their business. And that's just an area that has that. So it looks like it's a lot more welcoming than an area without trees. Okay, and we'll just go over some of the values. They've already spoke to this earlier, so we can just...
Like we're going to be putting tags on trees, hopefully in areas where there's a lot of traffic, and people will see the benefit of what the trees can do for us.
Just go, okay.
Well, we have 2
Yeah,
champion
yeah,
trees in Fall River,
Yeah.
so that is really...
State champion trees, yeah.
So that is really a great thing for us.
That's not the one on Alvino, is it?
The
one on the right
is not...
Yeah, that's French Street, the one on the left.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I see.
Okay, and these are just some other plantings that we found on Woodlawn and Rochester Street in the north end. And just as they spoke earlier, statistics show if you have trees, your property is going to be valued at a higher rate as opposed to someone that doesn't have mature trees. Trees help save the environment. We all know what this is here across the river. We have a higher asthma rate here in the Fall River area than other urban areas here, and it's probably directly related to this, but trees can help to alleviate this. Okay, let's go through that. Okay, benefits to us. Okay, again, yeah, it takes, and this was discussed earlier about releases oxygen and reduce carbon dioxide. So just go through that. Okay, and that's it's been spoken already, but go ahead.
Well, the stump removal, the city has just gotten the stump removal?
They
No?
did?
Yep.
No?
Yes.
I'm getting no back there.
No, you haven't?
No,
No.
not yet, hasn't
Okay.
come yet?
No, not yet.
Not
They
yet.
got one recently, didn't they?
Not a stump grinder.
What
We
is
actually
it?
have a wood chipper.
Chipper?
Well, that was another, that's actually,
They have a lot to chip there.
yeah. These are just some of the stumps here in Fall River. Just to go back to on the accomplishments, I think also they've hired more city employees in the park department as to what we had before. So stuff like this, they're saying is going to be, no?
Oh, another no.
No?
Mm.
I thought I read it. They weren't, didn't they hire? But they hired 3 new people though.
They haven't come in yet.
Really?
They're being hatched.
I don't know. I heard from Tom Eaton that we did, right, Tom?
They're with the stump grinder.
We've hired like a few more people for the park department to deal with the tree situation, right?
I had 2 people.
Okay. Yep. So that's another noteworthy accomplishment, I think, with the advocacy.
A new wood chipper,
Okay.
and we're trying to get a stump grinder right now.
Great.
We're moving forward.
Yeah, we're moving. You're right.
Very slowly.
But it's moving forward, so that's a positive.
They're moving forward.
Okay, and then these are just some of the groups here in Fall River that partner with us. Friends of Oak Grove Cemetery, the Garden Club, Healthy City Fall River, and the City of Fall River. And what do they work? And basically, you know, we're looking for an aggressive tree planting, and that's they're going to speak to that with this Building Props program, which I think is a great program. I believe Perry Long's going to speak to that later on. I think the tree budget is going to be alleviated with this new tree farm that they're putting together. And these are just the needs here. I don't want to repeat them or read them through. You guys can check that out. The Mass Relief Grant Program here at North Park, they basically paid for the trees that were planted for the Memorial Grove area, right? Is that no, this is North, I'm sorry.
Fall River Street Tree Planting Program paid for the Memorial Grove.
Great, okay. It looks similar to that, that's why, to that area.
Oh, they're all elms.
Okay. Okay, this is just another planting back in '04 at Abbott Court, and one that was here at Pulaski Park too also. And this was done about 2 years ago, Pleasant Street, that rotary there. This is Memorial Grove, sorry. I get a little bit far ahead of myself there. Okay, what can you do? Well, you can get involved with the street tree planting program, the Park Advocates Group. You can go in and try to advocate for this. Another thing is you can support our fundraisers. We have a clam boil that's going to be taking place at LePage's on May 6th from 4 to 8. The tickets are $20. And that money goes right back to planting trees. If you want to volunteer, we always need volunteers to help water plant trees. So that's, I don't know if you can think of anything else.
Sure.
Yep.
No, and then we're going to be planting a tree at the Children's Museum soon. We're going to Britland Park and planting 10 trees there. Chew Park, 6 trees.
Yep.
Durfee Street, Robeson, at least 22 trees. So we've got a lot of activity coming up. I think the tree tags that we're going to do for Arbor Day is going to be a neat thing for the people walking around to see the benefits of trees. It should be right in their face, and they should, So,
I think that is it.
yeah, the lot was already mentioned, so.
Good
So-
job, thank you.